Good morning, or good afternoon, and welcome to the second webinar in the Government Contracting Series. My name is Mary Jo Williams, and I will be your host and moderator for today's session. But before we get started, we have a couple of videos we'd like to play for you. Sit back and relax and enjoy.
Has your business been affected by COVID-19? The Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center is available to assist entrepreneurs and small businesses in the U.S. Virgin Islands. The VISBDC is sustained by the University of the Virgin Islands and the U.S. Small Business Administration and collaborates with local agencies to support the small business community. The VISBDC is nationally accredited and provides free consulting, business education training, and technical assistance. Attend workshops with subject matter experts from both the public and private sector. From idea generation to exit strategies, the staff at the VISBDC is ready to assist you. Now is the time to contact them if you need assistance with the Federal Paycheck Protection Program, so don't wait. Call or email them to find out how they can help your business grow and succeed.
¿Tu negocio ha sido afectado por COVID-19? El Centro de Desarrollo de Pequeñas Empresas está disponible para ayudar a los empresarios en las Islas Vírgenes de los Estados Unidos. El VISBDC es sostenido por la Universidad de las Islas Vírgenes y la Administración de Pequeñas Empresas de los Estados Unidos para apoyar a la comunidad de negocios pequeños. El VISBDC está acreditado a nivel nacional y ofrece consultoría gratuita, educación empresarial y asistencia técnica. Asista a talleres con expertos en la materia, tanto del sector público como del privado, desde generaciones de ideas hasta estrategia de salida. El personal del VISBDC está listo para ayudarlo. Ahora es el momento de contactarlos si necesita ayuda con el Programa Federal de Protección de Pago, ya que esta oportunidad de financiamiento está programada para finalizar el 31 de marzo del 2021. Llame o envíe un correo electrónico para averiguar cómo puede ayudar a que su negocio crezca y tenga éxito.
Good day. I'm Stacey Plaskett, Delegate to Congress for the Virgin Islands of the United States. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this Government Contracting webinar series. The VI Small Business Development Center, along with my team, have worked collaboratively over the past few weeks to pull together the invaluable resources and information that will be shared over the next month and a half. There are a number of excellent opportunities available to us as Virgin Islanders, and once we are armed with the right knowledge and opportunities, we have the capacity to truly build the future that we deserve. It is my hope that the details and resources provided will be a significant help for each of you who participate. A special thank you to Mary Jo Williams and the VI Small Business Development Center team who put this together. And thank you to each of you for joining us.
Okay, now let me introduce the team that's going to do our presentation for today. Magdalene Moranci, Esquire, serves as a department's chief legal counsel effective April 14th, 2020. Prior to the appointment, she served as the department's legal policy director from September 2016. Attorney Moranci serves as a legal advisor to the Commissioner of the Department of Property and Procurement and oversees the day-to-day operations of the department's legal division. Attorney Moranci serves as the final reviewer of various types of contracts, including construction, professional services, notices of violations, informal opinions, and other documents, internal policies and procedures, and proposed legislation affecting the department. She also is responsible for developing policies and procedures for the department, drafting proposed legislation and regulations, and presenting at Department of Planning and Department of Property and Procurement's training sessions under the Office of Procurement, Contract Management, and Reporting, which has the acronym of OPMCR. She has worked for the government of the Virgin Islands for 7 years. And our second presenter is Ms. Lisa Alejandro, and she is the Assistant Commissioner of the Department of Property and Procurement within the government of the Virgin Islands in the St. Thomas District. In her capacity, Assistant Commissioner Alejandro functions as the Chief Procurement Officer, responsible for managing and overseeing the territory's procurement, central stores, warehousing, and vendor maintenance divisions through the Office of Property Contract Management and Reporting, that famous OPCMR. She is also responsible for the training, development of all procurement professionals and is involved in the strategic management and business initiatives planning at the Department of Property and Procurement. Mrs. Alejandro has over 27 years of experience in inventory management and procurement, 17 of which she spent in government procurement while serving in various capacities such as contract administrator, manager of procurement and contracts, and chief deputy commissioner of procurement. Assistant Commissioner Alejandro is a certified contracting officer representative. She holds a master's degree in operations management and remains an active member of the National Contract Management Association. Without any further delay, I give to you our presenters from the Department of Property and Procurement, Attorney Moranci and Assistant Commissioner Lisa Alejandro. Ladies, you may proceed.
Good afternoon and welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Magdalene Moranci and I am Chief Counsel for the Department of Property and Procurement. With me today, Assistant Commissioner Lisa Alejandro will be supporting in the discussion on securing business with the government of the Virgin Islands. So want to start off by saying thank you very much for the invitation from SBDC and allowing us to be here to share with you some of the insights and the perspective that goes into the considerations in awarding contracts with the government. A little bit about property and procurement. We are a central support agency within the government, and we support the executive branch with the acquisition of goods and services for the performance of everything that they need. So we joke internally a lot that our mandate is to get the agencies what they need in order for them to fulfill their mandates, right, in supporting the people of the territory. We are under the able and amazing leadership of Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Anthony David Thomas, and under his leadership, we have really been on a mission with respect to sharing awareness into what we do and helping people understand the considerations that go into our processes at the department. We live and breathe procurement every day, so of course our perspective is different. And a lot of times it seems like we're speaking a different language, but we do our utmost to share, plain English translations of what we do in order to increase participation and give everyone greater chances of success. So again, thank you for the opportunity. And with that, we're going to jump into today's discussion on securing business with the government of the Virgin Islands. So when we go through the presentation today, we're going to discuss things following a particular format. We're going to talk about the solicitation methods, and then we're going to talk about, where you find opportunities, what considerations go into selecting and making an award, where you submit them. And the greatest takeaway, I would think, from today's discussion is we want you to pay attention to the solicitation documents. We have the opportunity to, field questions and answer those, and we will do those towards the end of the discussion on the slides that are prepared. And I believe that you can also use the chat function to send in comments as well that will be moderated. So jumping into the solicitation methods that the government uses. First of all, think of solicitation as an umbrella term in the world of procurement. And generally what it means is it's to ask, to make a request, right? And we do those through three main types when we do formal solicitations. And formal solicitations, think of those you see in the newspapers, those you see on our website, those you see on various online sources. Three main types. We have our invitation for bids, commonly known as IFBs. We have requests for proposals, shorthand term, RFPs, and we also have requests for qualifications, shorthand term being the RFQs. All of the opportunities that we have, they're available on our website, dpp.vi.gov. That is your primary source for so much information, and all active solicitations will be under the tab advertisements. And then they're also advertised in the newspapers and other various online sources. So we're gonna jump into discussing the actual solicitation types and the considerations that go with each one. And this is a screenshot of our website under the tab of advertisements. On the left-hand side of the screen under related content, those are active links that will take you to different parts of the website. And this is just a snapshot of some of the open solicitations that are available on our website right now. So jumping into IFBs, our invitations for bid. Think of those as almost the default method in terms of acquiring quantifiable goods and services. And when we say quantifiable, in the universe of an invitation for bids, the government knows exactly what it wants. The government knows how it wants it, when it wants it, the various specifications associated with it, right? So IFBs are used for services such as purchasing grocery items, purchasing milk for our educational facilities, purchasing various types of supplies, because going back to the definition of it being readily quantifiable, if you need 100 widgets that meets XYZ specifications, that is something that can be transformed to a line item solicitation. So that's why they fit the realm of the IFB. In an IFB, because the need is quantifiable, specific, everybody is submitting a bid on the exact same item. So in those particular solicitations, the criteria for award is the lowest responsible bidder. Now, what exactly does that mean? So when you think of lowest, of course, it's the idea of price, right? You submitted the best price out of all of the items, all of the prices that were awarded. But what does responsive mean? What does responsible mean? Because at the end of the day, you could have the lowest bid, but then the bid wasn't responsive or responsible, and then that would lead to disqualification as well. So it's a three-part analysis that goes into the evaluation and selection process. And because IFBs are readily quantifiable, everybody is submitting a bid on the exact same thing, no modifications, no substitutions. The award is made primarily based on price and price-related factors, right? So we're saying that to let you know that IFBs are non-negotiable. You can't submit a bid for $50 and try to negotiate it down to $45. That's not how it works. So now that we've taken care of the discussion on what lowest means, let's talk responsiveness, right? Because you have to meet that element of being responsive. So responsiveness essentially means that you have complied with the bid in all material respects. Think of it from the perspective of answering the bid, right? Does your bid answer the question that was asked. Does it satisfy the need? What goes into determining whether you're responsive or not? Of course, the big one and the first thing is on-time bid submission. When you go through the invitation for bids, they all have instructions to the bidders, and they all outline when the bids are due, where they should be submitted, what time they should be submitted by, because in an invitation, everybody has to have the same opportunity, and the same opportunity goes to the same amount of time to prepare. There can be no instances that creates prejudice to the other bidders. So in an instance where your bid is late, you've lost out on that opportunity because you've missed the cutoff point and you cannot be considered. So submit your bids on time. In keeping with the theme of responding to the invitation based on what the actual invitation calls for, if there are mandatory site visits and mandatory pre-bid conferences, please participate, right? Because then that goes to determining responsiveness or not. Every IFB will outline the type of documents, supporting business documents that must be included in the packet in order for you to be considered. So please pay attention to the listing of documents that are required for that specific IFB and ensure that you submit the documents that are requested, because that also goes towards determining your responsiveness. So an example of the list of items that the IFB will call for are listed on these slides. So it's a basic premise and requirement that in order to conduct business in the territory of the Virgin Islands, you have to be licensed by DLCA, right? And so you're going to need a current business license, not only current, but it has to be in a category for the services that are being advertised. If you have a trade name, if your business has a fictitious business name, a DBA, a name other than the legal name within which you were formed, that has to be registered and current with the Office of the Lieutenant Governor. Those expire every 2 years. So if you do have one, you need a current trade name certificate. If you are organized as a type of entity that requires a certificate of good standing based on the fact that you do certain annual filings with the LGO every year, due by June 30th, you're going to need a current certificate of good standing. And because the requirement to file certain taxes and reports are due by June 30th of each calendar year, the year of validity on your good standing certificate, it runs from July 1 to June 30th. So considering that we're in March of 2021, we are looking for certificates of good standing that are dated July 1, 2020 or more recently, because that's the current cycle that we're in. So what that goes to say is if your certificate of good standing is dated, May of 2019, don't get tripped up into thinking that it's valid until, May of 2020 or May of 2021, because we are already in a new cycle. So please pay attention to that. And they all have an expiration date on them now. The invitation will also call for your formation documents. So that could be your articles of incorporation, if you're incorporated, or the articles of organization for the limited liability companies, or the statement of qualification or certificate of limited partnership for the various types of limited partnerships. You're going to need current proof of SAM.gov registration. It is imperative that all contractors, all vendors, potential or existing, obtain their DUNS number, register with SAM.gov, and keep that registration current, because this too is an annual requirement. And one of the things that I know we are all privy to is that a number of the agencies in the Virgin Islands, we receive a lot of federal funding, and it's part of the requirements in terms of eligibility to receive a federal award, whether you are a prime contractor or a subcontractor, that you cannot be suspended or debarred. So please register and keep those registrations current. In going on the discussion of determining whether you are responsive or not, the invitation will also include requirements for you to outline your organization type, outline your personnel, your number of employees that you will assign to the project, etc. So it's important to fill that in. It will also ask for project experience, fill that in as well, and will also require 2 reference letters. So a minimum of 2 reference letters. So please be sure to include those as well, because it's part of determining whether you're responsive, and then some of it will carry over into determining whether you are responsible, because it's a 3-part analysis. To complete the discussion on determining responsiveness, since all of the packages, all of the invitations will have instructions, it will also include all of the required forms that the bidder is supposed to complete. So the IFB, with it being readily quantifiable, it covers supply contracts, and it could be supply contracts for services. Think of the realm of janitorial services, exterminating, those are covered under supply contracts. It also covers the purchase of goods. So the early example of purchasing milk, purchasing grocery items, tires, oils, lubricants, that type of thing. In completing that packet, you will have to do a completed bid sheet, and you would submit a price for each of the items that are listed. And then you are required to complete the non-collusion affidavit and include that in the package as well. Bear in mind that the non-collusion affidavit, it's specific for each bid. So you're averring and you're providing verification that this is not a sham bid, you haven't consulted and fixed prices, those type of things. With it being specific to each particular bid, you complete one for each submission that you do. So it's not something that you're supposed to be recycling. And then another thing that's covered through the IFB or the invitation for bids, those are going to be construction projects, because those 2 are readily quantifiable based on the specifications and the scope of work. And you will be including a completed bid sheet. You will be including the contractor's qualification statement form. Again, that's included in the packet. Your condensed financial statement form, included in the packet as well, and a completion of a non-collusion affidavit as well for that particular project. The forms are included in the packet, and you're encouraged and required to use the forms that are provided in order to complete your bid packet. So the other thing that will be included in the packet for the IFBs, and this is specific to construction projects. On construction projects, each bidder is required to provide a bid guarantee. And the form is included in the packet. It's a DPP specific form. And the amount on a bid bond is 5% of the contract price for bids valued in excess of $150,000. So this is actually a new threshold for those of you who have been submitting bids on construction projects before. You may recall that the threshold was up to $50,000, right? Anything in excess of $50,000, you needed to submit a bid bond. But we have transitioned and were able to change legislation to increase that threshold to $150,000. And what it does is it brings us in line with the federal requirements, because their threshold is $150,000 as well. And it also makes it creates a bit of ease of participation in the process, because now that the value has increased, it's less risk and less cumbersome for some of the surety companies to have to underwrite such smaller projects. So that comes with ease of participation. The other thing to think of with respect to submitting bid bonds is that we also have the preferred bidder statute in the territory, and that applies to locally funded projects only, because you can't have geographical preferences on federal awards. So in an instance where you may be submitting a bid in response to a locally funded project, if the preferred bidder statute applies, then the percentage of your bid guarantee, it's going to vary from 2% to 5%, based on a criteria and a scale in terms of the amount of the contract. So you won't be required to do the full 5%. You will be doing either 2%, 3% based on the amount of your bid. It's incumbent upon the bidder to determine whether they meet the definition of a preferred bidder in terms of making those elections on the forms where required and to submit that. If a bidder fails to submit the required bonding documents as a bid guarantee, that's an express grounds in our regulations that will deem your bid non-responsive. So if it calls for a bid bond, please pay attention to the instructions and the specifications in the packet and make sure that you're submitting a bond that qualifies and satisfies that requirement. So for those who, with the default being 5% of the contract price, the bid guarantee is going to be in the form of either the actual bid bond that's included in the packet, the form. Some people do money orders, some people do certified checks, and some people do irrevocable letters of credit. And all of those are acceptable ways of meeting the requirements when you submit a bid bond with your packet, okay? So big takeaway, treat every invitation on its own. So a lot of times people get tripped up in completing the packet because we completed the packet based on our last experience. We completed a packet based on what we normally do or what we think is supposed to be done. But every invitation is going to be specific, and while there are general laws and requirements with respect to what we do, think of it that, you know, licensing criteria might be different. You might need a specific category. So you have to pay attention to those items to be able to actually satisfy the bid requirements. So that takes us through our discussion on being responsive. The last element in the decision in evaluating and awarding is whether the bidder is responsible or not. Because remember, it's the lowest responsible bidder. So what goes into whether somebody is responsible or not, right? You have the low price, you have responded to all of the requirements in the actual invitations in terms of submitting the documents, filling out the form. What next? Well, let's look, can you actually perform? You have the price, you answered the bid, but can you actually perform? Can you actually deliver to give the government what it needs? And that goes to the discussion of responsibleness. So we consider delivery terms, technical financial resources, capacity, and service reputation. Some of the common errors that we see that go to affecting the decision on whether a bidder is responsible or not, you fail to submit the required bond forms. You fail, the bid is not, it doesn't cover what was required in the packet itself. You fail to submit the required documents, business license, non-collusion affidavit. Those things are not included in the packet. And of course, the requirements are more stringent here when determining responsiveness because it goes to answering the bid, and that speaks to IFBs. Or you might fail to provide the required equipment listing. So depending on the scope of services, the scope of work to be performed under this particular contract, you might need particular equipment, you might need a particular number of employees to be able to effectuate in the schedule that is required. If you fail to provide that information, it prohibits the government and evaluation committee from doing the proper analysis as to whether you can actually perform or not. Industry license is a big one as well, because again, depending on the type of services, you might need particular coverage through the issuance of a license, and that goes to whether you are able to perform or not because you are not duly licensed in the category. Another common issue is the failure to disclose your subcontracting information. in going through the packets and the invitations, it will call for the bidders to list out what's being subcontracted, the percentages that you're subcontracting or not, because again, that goes to your ability and your capability to perform. So, some of the common errors with respect to just the packages in general. So we've already established that the criteria for award is the lowest responsible bidder. Lowest, of course, that's a pure analysis on price. Responsiveness goes to the actual bid. Did you submit a packet that complies with what was asked for? And whether you are responsible or not goes to whether you are going to be able to actually perform if selected. So read the solicitation document, they all have instructions, and submit a packet that complies with the instructions laid out in that solicitation. Treat each solicitation as its own, okay? Common errors in the packages. So with respect to actually submitting the bids, we see instances where it might be the incorrect solicitation number is listed. And we also see instances where the bids might be delivered to an incorrect address. We're territory, right? And we have offices in St. Thomas and St. Croix. We have certain services that are territory-wide, and we have certain services that are district-specific. So thinking of delivering to an incorrect designated location, it might be a St. Croix project being delivered to St. Thomas, or a St. Thomas project being delivered to St. Croix. During the actual evaluation process, some of the common errors that we see will be a discrepancy between a unit cost and the total cost. So each bid form will give you the opportunity for each line item to do a unit cost and a total cost. If there's a discrepancy between the total and the unit cost is what is going to prevail. Sometimes we see instances of incomplete bid sheets, and then we're unable to determine the total cost of the bid. For some items, under the invitation for bids, especially for the purchase of certain items, multiple different types of things being covered on one bid sheet, multiple people, multiple bidders can win different products or different items, right? Because each item is treated separately. And sometimes the cost is just not legible, whether it's the unit cost or it's the total cost. And if we're doing handwritten forms, it's important that when we write in those numbers, that they're legible so that they can be read and evaluated in due course, because you don't want to miss out on an opportunity just because something is not legible. So some of the considerations that go into why a bidder would not be awarded, these are just a few examples here. So, and they're all related specifically to the world of construction, because construction contracts are awarded through IFBs. So we might have an instance where the bid is just unreasonably low, right? Or the price is just unreasonable in general. It far exceeds the engineer's estimate, or it's too far below the engineer's estimate. If a price is way too low, it raises concern as to, one, whether you're going to be able to actually complete the project, and two, what is the probability and the chances of having to process change orders to get you to the point of having to actually complete the project. So if it's abnormally low, it's unreasonably low, it's not a true reflection, and it's not a true low bid because it's not a complete picture. So that is going to raise some flags. So there's also going to be flags raised if the variability between the lowest bid and the highest bid is too large. or if, you know, the lowest bid is it's way below or way above the engineer's estimate. That's going to raise some questions. And then there are times when the most advantageous factor has to be considered to determine the lowest cost overall. So there are times when each item has to be looked at side by side on each particular bid. So we're still discussing invitations for bid, the IFBs, and some of the things that we want to discuss here are what are considered minor informalities, or minor irregularities. So the bid is not perfect, but in as much as it's not perfect, the imperfections are not going to disqualify you, right, on their face. They're not going to disqualify you, but it is important, and we have to discuss them nonetheless. So if you submitted an incorrect number of copies, that's not something that's going to disqualify you. It's going to be considered a minor informality. If you fail to sign the bid form, but we can tell from the rest of the packet that you intended to submit this bid. For instance, you signed a cover letter, or you submitted a bid bond that covers the proper percentage of the bid cost, then from extrinsic evidence, we can see that the intent was to actually submit this bid. And so failure to sign the form in and of itself is not going to disqualify you. If you fail to list the number of employees, that won't necessarily disqualify you. If you fail to acknowledge receipt of the amendments, that's not going to disqualify you, but only if the amendment doesn't change the actual bid schedule or the scope of work. So if the amendment is for something simple like correcting numbering of documents or changing a date, you failing to acknowledge receipt of an amendment but submitting a bid that complies with the amended version is not going to disqualify you, because by virtue of the fact that you have satisfied the requirements as outlined in the amendment, it means you've seen the amendment. If there's a misplacement of a decimal point in a unit cost, that's not going to disqualify you. If there is a calculation error, that's not going to disqualify you either. However, the caveat here is that those errors with respect to that, they have to be apparent clerical errors. And then with them being apparent clerical errors, we have the opportunity to ask you to clarify and make a revision to clarify the record. But those, the listing here, in and of themselves, they're considered minor informalities, and they will not disqualify you. And in as much as they won't, we still encourage you to strive for near perfection bid packages. So, what goes into selecting a winner? Again, lowest responsive, responsible bidder. And then in the realm of construction contracts, the bid amount also has to be reasonable compared to the actual engineer's estimate. And we say that because you can be the lowest responsive, responsible bidder, but because you're so far off from the engineer's estimate, or because you're so far off from the government's budget, you're not going to get awarded. So those considerations come into play. We're also looking at whether your previous projects are similar to the scope of work that we're looking for a contractor for. Those are considered as well. And we also look for full compliance with the bid requirements in the packet. Take a look at your past and current projects, your reputation, financial ability, technical resources, etc. So these 3 bullet points go back to the entire previous discussion that we've just had on the fact that the award is made to the lowest responsive, responsible bidder. And that is for our invitation for bids and those readily quantifiable supply contracts, construction contracts. Think of the universe of buying goods and readily quantifiable services. So that's our first and very common and popular solicitation type. So we are going to talk a little bit about RFPs and RFQ solicitations. So those are RFP being the request for proposals, RFQ being the request for qualifications. So for these, we've combined the discussion on RFP and RFQs just because although there are two different solicitation types, the analysis into award, they mirror each other. They're similar. And so for those purposes, we have combined the discussion. So what is the difference between an IFB and an RFP, right? In terms of the services and why you would use one over the other. In an RFP, the government, we know what we want, right? We know what we want, but we don't necessarily know the best approach to get there. So this might be in terms of something like a research project or for certain architectural and engineering services, medical services, legal services, those types of things, consultancies, marketing, those type of things. So the award is not made to the lowest responsible bidder because the scope of work is not specified on that level where it's readily quantifiable. So in this instance, the award is made to the respondent that offers the best value of services. And in determining best value, we look at price and other factors. The selection process is based on points, and the award is made to the respondent that has the highest cumulative points. RFPs are negotiable. RFPs and RFQs are negotiable. The things that are negotiable includes cost, the scope, the terms, and the conditions. Because remember, we know what we want, but not necessarily the best approach to get it. So every respondent using their own technical resources, their own either proprietary processes, etc., submits their proposal in terms of what they believe will be the best way to get us to what we want. And RFQs, similar analysis, and we would use those where we're looking for multiple contractors to one award, and we're going to negotiate the same price with each awardee. And so that's one way to do it. It will be at a rate that's negotiable by the negotiated by the government, and we will have multiple awards from that one solicitation. Another instance where it would work is we are looking to pre-screen people based on qualifications to determine the pool of available and capable contractors who can perform a particular scope of service. So one thing to take away outside of the fact that we are going to be reading our solicitation documents and submitting responses in accordance with that particular document is that the Virgin Islands Code and the way it's laid out, there are various different ways in which the government can procure goods and services. And so the ability to use the RFQs to pre-screen respondents would be used in instances where we're using another exemption in the statute that allows for selection without formal solicitation. So it would be like a step one. So similarly, we look at responsiveness and responsibleness in awarding under an RFP or an RFQ as well. But the analysis is a little bit different. All responses to an RFP or an RFQ will be considered to the maximum extent that's possible. And the solicitation document in and of itself will outline what the contents of that proposal needs to be. The other thing the solicitation document does is it points out and it tells you the criteria on which you're going to be rated and how it's weighted in terms of what's the most important, what's the least important. So it's ranked, and that gives you an idea as to where to focus attention. So the contents of the proposal, it covers requesting things about the organizational structure of the contractor, the type of consulting services. It requests a discussion on project experience, qualifications, your project approach in terms of how you plan to undergo to deliver for this particular project. It's going to ask for project references just because we need to have the ability to do comparisons to see whether the scope of services now is relevant to your past experience in your ability to be able to deliver. And then cost for your actual performance of the services is going to be included in that packet as well. With the RFPs and the RFQs, because they're different from IFBs, the lowest respondent does not necessarily get awarded because, at least in terms of price, because price is just one of the considerations. It's price and other factors considered. It allows for a trade-off. It allows for a trade-off with respect to maybe we thought we needed to do something monthly and the contractor's approach, has a better outcome if it's done quarterly. Or maybe we wanted to do things in person, but there's a better way to do it through virtual means because this is where the world is headed now. And so all of those things are considerations that can be played with and that can affect cost in terms of your RFP. And so those go into determining whether the proponent or the respondent is responsive or responsible. And of course, at the end of the day, the biggest takeaway from today's discussion, I would hope, is that we always look at the actual solicitation that we are responding to, treat it as your checklist, treat it as your roadmap, and every response, every bid, every proposal that you are submitting, it complies with the requirements in that actual solicitation, because that gets you to your best chance of success. In the realm of the digital world that we live in right now, we do have an e-portal, and bids and proposals are submitted to ebids_proposals at dpp.vi.gov. But again, if the specific set of instructions in the actual solicitation allows for like hand-carried bids, then you would also be able to submit those at the address designated in the IFB. And those are the prepared slides for today. And we will open for questions that have not already been answered in the chat.
Okay, you all are invited to put your questions in the chat. And while we are waiting for a question from the audience, Attorney Moranci, so people that are applying to do contracting work with the government of the Virgin Islands, they have to register in sam.gov. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And even if they're applying for, okay, that's good. Okay, great. And that's the sam.gov registration has to be done on an annual basis?
Yeah, because it has an expiration date, And so it tells you once you search the status, it tells you whether the contractor is active, suspended, debarred. If it's an active status, it tells you how the period. So it has an expiration date and you update every year.
Okay. And for those in the audience that are not aware, the Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center staff is available to help you get registered in SAM. So you can contact us and we will assist you with that process. It is not an instant process, so be prepared to wait, but also make sure you have all of your documents together and you can register online for us to assist you or call and leave a message in our with our phones. Now there's a question. Submit RFP, RFQ for any government agency to DPP? And also, where do we find the contracts open to bid?
So good afternoon. So you can visit our website, www.dpp.vi.gov. All of our current and, as a matter of fact, past solicitations will be online on our website. You can just do a quick search and you will be able to get up all of those RFPs or IFBs that are available and current to bid on. And I would like to also add, if I can, that the Department of Property and Procurement also assists vendors with getting their SAMS.gov registration. And again, you're invited to contact us at any time for assistance. So thank you so much.
And for your convenience and review, I have put a copy of the presentation in the chat, so you may download that and review at your convenience. Another question. Oh, I guess I answered that question. I put the presentation there before I read the question. All right. All right, let's see. And okay, we don't have a question right now, but next week's government contracting webinar will be tips, strategies, and best practices for doing business with the federal and the VI government. And that presentation will also be at 12 o'clock. And we have 4 more webinars in this series. The one after that will be on bonding. And that's an issue for a lot of people that want to do business with the federal and the local government. So that session it'll be bonding 101. So that'll be a good webinar for folks to attend. And then ODR is putting on a presentation on the 22nd of April. And there's not one next week. Next week is the holiday. So the next government contracting webinar will be on April the 8th at 12 o'clock. April the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd, and the 29th. So be sure to tune in for those, and it should be very good information. Is there another question? I don't see another question. Now, in terms of what's the most frequent reason for people not to be awarded contracts? Or maybe the most frequent reason that their application isn't considered?
So there's quite a few of them. Common errors that we do find in the solicitation process. It can be from failure to submit any of the, a large amount of the corporate documents, such as having the applicable license to do the service that you're bidding on. It can also be from failure to submit or to submit your, especially SAMS.gov registration. We find a lot of calculation errors that may result in the bidder that may have been the lowest responsive bidder to becoming the bidder that is not the lowest responsive. It can be from not submitting the bid timely. Those are the most current that we find in the solicitation process. just omitting documents. And that's why we ask that bidders pay very close attention to the instructions. Because in order to get an opportunity at the table, you have to at first at least be responsive to those instructions. So we encourage bidders to look at the responsibilities, the time, the place, and the documents that are required just to get a seat at the table.
If people wait until the last minute to submit their bid packages, are there things that you could have helped them with before if you received it earlier?
Absolutely. Because each solicitation type has a period for question and answers, for clarification from the bidders, and it allows the government to respond to the bidders' concerns. This is important for both the bidders and the government as well, because as Attorney Moranci talked about earlier, there are times that when we submit RFPs, while the government knows what it wants, we are sending it out to a pool of experts who this is what they do. And sometimes it allows the government as well to get discoveries in the process. And so it's very important to, again, take the time to fill in your proposals, to ensure that you have a very clear understanding, number one, of what the government's needs are. And then you have an opportunity to submit those questions and receive answers to those questions.
They can submit questions and receive answers if they don't wait until the deadline to submit the package.
That is correct.
That the day that the proposal is supposed to be submitted, that's when everybody and their brother is calling to ask a question.
It happens very frequently. And let me say that the answers and question period, it's timed. So the cutoff is before the proposals are due. So even while there may be a week or 2 weeks before the proposals are due, if you do not submit your questions or answers before that window closes, the chances are you will not get a response, and to be able to submit a bid that is responsive to that solicitation. So we urge our bidders to pay attention to those instructions and the dates and times.
Okay. And in listening to the presentation, there are lots of corporate documents that need to be submitted along with the proposals. So it's a good idea for people to keep their paperwork up to date.
Oh, definitely it is. And let me say, what we did do is we sort of provided the universe of those documents so that our bidders or public can get a good idea of the documents that may be needed. Again, each solicitation may have its requirements, and at times we may not ask for all of the documents that are there. And that's why it's important to pay close attention to those requirements, what is needed. But yes, at some point, what we also add to that RFP or the IFB is documents that the contractor, the vendor, the awardee will need once they are awarded a contract. So in any instance and in all instances, those documents at some point would have to be submitted if they were not required for the bidding process.
Okay. And one last question on my part. All of those forms are listed on your website, the different ones that are needed?
Yes, they are. All of the contractual documents to do business with the government, you will find it on the procurement tab on our website.
Okay, okay, great.
I may add, every form that's required for a particular invitation for bid or RFP, it will be included in the actual solicitation packet itself. So a bidder doesn't have to go looking for the forms to compile the packet. We actually put forth the entire packet that just needs to be completed and submitted.
Okay. Well, that's great. So the packet is presented, and all people have to do is pick it up and read and submit and ask questions along the way if they have them.
Well, actually, they can just download it from our website. We do it all electronically now, so.
All right, technology rules. Very good, very good. Well, Attorney Moranci and Assistant Commissioner Alejandro, there don't seem to be any more questions in the chat. So on behalf of the State Director of the Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center, Mr. Ted Gutierrez, and the staff in St. Croix and the staff in St. Thomas for the Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center, I want to thank you very, very much for your presentation today. And the delegate to Congress, man, we can't ask for more in terms of support. So on behalf of all of our parts, we want to thank you. And for the audience that participated today, thank you very much. And we will see you guys this afternoon for our basic bookkeeping workshop. This is the one that's going to cover payroll information. So to submit good government bids, you got to have good books. So we'll see you this afternoon. And again, ladies, thank you very much for your time and attention, and we appreciate the presentation. Take care.
Thank you
Have a great day.
for the opportunity.